and his vote alone. Want to bring in Democratic Congressman Casten of Illinois. He's a member of the Financial Services Committee and the House Select Committee on the climate crisis. Congressman, thanks for joining us on this. Appreciate it. Listen, Senator Sanders essentially going after his own Senate colleagues because of not being able to get this thing across the finish line. What do you make of it?
It is tragic. Like, we're sitting here looking at, as you mentioned, the wildfires, the rising sea levels. But beyond that, we are being pressed to say, what can you do to lower energy costs? And everybody who has a solar panel, who has an electric vehicle, who has a more efficient home spends a lot less on energy. We should be doing that for selfish reasons. And at the end of the day, we're stuck. Manchin is a symptom. He's not the problem. The problem is the U.S. Senate, that by design massively overrepresents land at the expense of people, which means they massively overrepresent the interests of energy producers at the expense of energy consumers. And so instead of prioritizing cleaner air and cheaper energy, we prioritize the interests of people who want to dig things out of the ground and set them on fire in the Senate. And until the Senate realizes that they have a massive structural defect, we're going to continue to be an embarrassment on the world stage.
What about the responsibility of Senator Schumer and getting someone like Senator Joe Manchin on board to deliver the votes that they need?
I think it's a great question. We have got to get to a point where we elect more people who give a damn about the planet, who think it's more important to protect the planet than the filibuster in the Senate. But we've also got to ask some hard questions about why it is that leadership in the Senate decided to put someone like Joe Manchin in charge of Senate energy policy. Because you don't do that if you fundamentally understand the stakes of this moment in our history. And I would like to see much stronger leadership to actually view climate change as a policy problem, not just a political problem to be dealt with every time you're up for election.
You see the United States having to dance with a country like Saudi Arabia because of the oil crisis across the world right now, having to dance with a country like Russia that continues to invade the sovereignty of Ukraine. I can't help but wonder as to whether or not your colleagues see one of the major reasons why this country needs energy independence and clean energy at that, for those very reasons, if not no other.
I mean, I certainly do. I think my colleagues on the Select Committee certainly do. And we try to remind folks all the time that if you really want to hurt Vladimir Putin, change the U.S. economy so that we don't depend on fossil fuel, right? Help the Europeans do the same. That also, by the way, makes us not dependent on people like MBS in Saudi Arabia. Do remember also that every single person who is claiming right now that we need to do something about energy costs, how many of them were complaining 2 years ago when Donald Trump called MBS and said, we are going to take troops out of Saudi Arabia unless you cut back on your production to raise energy costs? Go look that up. People were celebrating Donald Trump and the Republican Party because he caused oil prices to spike. How many of them complained? And I think I mention that because that's the rub. The people who are advocating for the interests in the fossil fuel industry are not advocating for cheap energy. They're advocating for expensive energy. No one in the fossil energy industry wants to sell their product for cheap, right? They want to sell it for more. That's what they're pushing for. That's why they're so scared about a transition to clean energy, because they know that they can't compete on an economically equivalent ground.
And I wonder if this is really one of the reasons, sir, and this is from the New York Times, just 1% of voters in a recent New York Times Siena College poll naming climate change as the most important issue facing the country. 1%, even among voters under 30 years of age, the group thought to be most energized by the issue. That figure was at 3%. Could that be one of the driving factors?
I think, frankly, don't blame the voters, blame the elected officials. I spent 20 years of my career in the climate and clean energy before I came to Congress. I ran on climate not because it polled well, but because it is an important thing, and I am under the belief that if you are in a position in leadership, your job is to lead. And this is what I said about criticizing some of the leadership in my own party. If you look at polls and say this isn't important, and you conclude that you shouldn't talk about it, then what you are saying is that you are not capable of leadership. If you look at polls and say this isn't something that polls well with the voters, and yet it is critically important that we do it, and I understand this because I have access to the briefings and the experts at NOAA and NASA and the EPA, and you are capable of leadership, then you stand up, you get out front, and you educate the voters and bring them along. We've done that in our congressional district. We need more leaders at the national level to understand. And I've had this conversation with the president himself. As long as this issue polls lower than it needs to be, then our work as leaders is not done. And we need more leaders to step up and explain that to folks.
Congressman Sean Casten, thank you.